right, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. I am Dr. Chandler David Schexnayder, and I am a product of PILS, which is short for Pharmacy Initiative Leaders Incorporated. We are dedicated to changing the face of healthcare at every stage through impacting our community, classroom, and capital. And you can actually join us on this mission by following us at PILS Connect, that's PILS Connect, on all our social media platforms. I just really want to say I'm really excited about this Imposter Syndrome's Volume 2 tonight. And I have the absolute honor of introducing our amazing host, Dr. Xavier Hill. Dr. Hill received his Doctor of Pharmacy degree from Creighton University in Omaha, Nebraska. After completing an ASHP accredited pharmacy practice residency at Creighton University Medical Center in Omaha, Nebraska, he practiced as a clinical specialist in infectious disease, HIV, at County of Santa Clara Valley Medical Center in San Jose, California. Currently, he works as a clinical pharmacy specialist and COVID vaccine coordinator at Tiber Rubin VA Medical Center in Long Beach, California. Dr. Hill serves as both as an excellent PILS ambassador and coach. And I also want to add that Dr. Hill is someone I've been knowing since 2011 from our Xavier undergraduate days. And since then, and actually joining as a PILS ambassador last year, he's been an outstanding asset to pharmacy initiative leaders. And he's just definitely grown into an absolute leader. And I'm excited to what he brings to the table along with his amazing panel. So without further ado, Dr. Hill.
All right, thank you, Chan, for that wonderful introduction. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming out to our Volume 2 of the Imposter Syndrome series webinar. I would also like to do like Chan and invite you guys to follow us on social media. He didn't say specifically, but on YouTube, Instagram, and Twitter, we're at PILS Connect. And then on Facebook and LinkedIn, you can find us at Pharmacy Initiative Leaders. All right, so make sure you follow us so you won't miss any of this great content that we have for you in the future. All right, so in Volume 1, we talked about the data and the research behind what can lead to the phenomena known as imposter syndrome. We also talked about who it affects. Tonight, we will give you real life experiences on how to overcome it. So, imposter syndrome was coined by doctors Pauline Clance and Suzanne Imes back in 1978. The term is defined as a concept describing individuals who are marked by an inability to internalize their accomplishments. They also have a persistent fear of being exposed as a fraud. Imposter syndrome is the overwhelming feeling that you don't deserve success, or you were just lucky enough or in the right place at the right time to achieve success. It convinces you that you're not intelligent, creative, or talented as you may seem. It can lead to self-doubt, anxiety, and depression. Can we have a thumbs up in the chat if you have ever felt the experience of imposter syndrome? Yeah, we have tons of thumbs up out there. So once again, I just want to let you know, we discussed this topic. We want to discuss this topic more because groups of people who are most vulnerable to imposter syndrome are 1, minority, and 2, women. Many of the people here tonight fit in one or both of those categories. Today, to help us talk about this subject, we have some amazing pharmacists here who are going to give us advice on how to overcome the never-ending struggle of imposter syndrome. First, I would like to introduce to you Dr. Crease.
Thank you so much, Dr. Hill. Good evening, everyone. As mentioned, I'm Dr. Keturah Crease. I'm super excited to speak with you all this evening. A little bit of my background, I'm actually currently completing my postdoctoral fellowship through Merck and the Rutgers program. And so as I continue into my second year, I'll actually be serving as chief fellow for the Rutgers program. So I'm super excited to hold this leadership position and continue to liaise with stakeholders all across pharma and just continue to bridge those gaps that we see currently. A little bit more of my background, I'm also a graduate of Xavier University College of Pharmacy. So shout out to anyone from Xavier who's on the line. I really spent my time at Xavier trying to hone in what exactly I wanted to do in pharmacy. And so that's where I found my passion for oncology research and academia. So I also love to teach. That's a passion of mine. I will always incorporate teaching in my current career. And while at Xavier, I spent time conducting basic sciences research on personal care products and breast cancers. So really looking at estrogenic or anti-estrogenic activity of different shampoos, conditioners, lotions, butters that women may chronically use on their skin or scalp. So that was definitely a passion project of mine. So it led me into my current role today, where I serve in a clinical scientist role in oncology late stage clinical development. So I'll talk a little bit more about my role and what imposter syndrome looks like kind of in my field. I know I'm one of the younger clinicians on the line, so I'm happy to provide that perspective, and I'm definitely excited to speak with you all. I'll transition to my colleague, Dr. Bay.
So hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Dawn Bay. I'm currently working in pharma now as a director in health economics outcomes research at Taiho Oncology. I'm a graduate of Texas Southern University down here in Houston, Texas. I'm back in Houston now, so I'm very excited to be back in Texas after living on the East Coast for a number of years. I completed the residency that's joined by FAMU and Bristol Myers Squibb. I did my fellowship in what was R&D strategy and analytics at that time, doing a lot of competitive intelligence work, which was completely out of my field and scope of experience. So that's where I first kind of encountered a lot of this kind of imposter syndrome, which we'll talk about later on. I've held a number of roles, both in-house in med affairs and also in the field as an MSL and also in the field doing health economics. So I've been working in pharma, so I hate to say almost, I guess, 9 years or so now. So I have had a few years of experience, and I think that imposter syndrome is something that you have to continuously work on throughout your career. So I'm happy to talk about how that has looked different in different roles, both with interacting with individuals in pharma and also customers that we cover.
Lastly, we have Dr. Chiles.
Hi, how you doing, everybody? My name is Dr. Robert Chiles. I'm currently a diabetes care manager at Santa Clara Valley Medical Center. Just a little bit about me. I went to Oakwood University in Huntsville, Alabama, and then I traveled my way to Loma Linda, California to go to the Loma Linda School of Pharmacy. I did my PGY1 at Kern Medical in Bakersfield, California, and I did my ambulatory PGY2 residency in Santa Clara Valley Medical Center. And so now this is my second year, going to my second year being a diabetes care manager, and it's been great.
Wonderful. Now that you guys have met our amazing panel, we're ready to get started here. So I'm going to take us to the top and go to our very first question. So first question is, share an example of when you felt like an imposter and how you overcame that feeling. We'll let Dr. Chiles start us off with this question.
Well, I appreciate it. The first time I felt that was during my first year of residency. It's my second rotation. It was internal medicine. And it's actually my second day, and my preceptor actually had to leave. And so I was caught being on rounds just by myself, and just being a new grad at the time, I felt so inadequate because like I was in a new team and everybody was looking for me for med recommendations and, oh, what about this dose? Or can we give it to this patient? And it was such a scary feeling, and I could never forget it. I was just, what if I dose it wrong or get the wrong recommendation and my preceptor's not there? It was just something that I don't want to relive again, but it was vital for me for my career moving forward, because I realized that after that day, and I was just sweating bullets all day, I went to my preceptor and I told him, I said, hey, I felt like I didn't do anything. And just the way he kind of like sat me down to say, like, it's okay. It's you're new, and you have to be okay with not knowing. And he said, you're better off not knowing than pretending that you know something and then a patient could get hurt. So that was my experience. And I'm glad I got that early so I could have that lesson throughout my career.
Thank you. What a wonderful response. Yes, talking to your mentors or anyone about the subject can really help you overcome the feelings of imposter syndrome. I just also want to let you guys know in the chat, if you have any questions, feel free to enter them in, throw them in there. We may be able to get to we will try to get to your questions as we go on throughout tonight. So from the fellowship side, I also would like Dr. Crease to try to answer this question for us and give us a little bit of advice.
Absolutely. So I can share a time of imposter syndrome for myself that was pretty recent. So I know that the pandemic really has shaped a lot of our lives in unique ways. But for me, I was that COVID class of 2020, didn't have like a formal graduation and all of the like. So to me, it just didn't feel real. For a long time, I had, graduated with my certificate on paper. I took the New Jersey law, the Texas law, the NAPLEX. So I was a licensed pharmacist, but still none of it felt real to me because I didn't get those rites of passages, if you will. So I started my current position at Merck remotely. And so now that's the norm and that is what happens often. But I definitely feel that when you're in a space of newness and you feel a bit isolated, it gets hard. So what I would like to shed light on there is really building your sense of network and community. So in the virtual space, to me, it's a little bit more challenging trying to build connections. So I made sure day one in July when I started that every single person on my team, I set up individual meetings with them. I wanted to get to know them and really learn from them, learn what advice that they could share for me since I was such a new person coming in. And then also I really wanted to find that mentor, but also someone who would advocate for me. And I think that's so important, really finding someone who is well-versed in your field, who has been doing this for years and years, and who's really willing to take you under their wing and can talk with you through some of those challenges that you may have or those anxieties that you may feel, but also for me, understanding that you're here for a reason, you're more than qualified, you are purposeful, and you're really going to make an impact on your team. But sometimes you have to talk it through. Sometimes other people have to tell you that before you can really start to understand it. So that is what I'd like to share with the group here. Just really try to talk to people and encourage you to live in your truth, really speak candidly about how you're feeling, because there are people who can say, you know what, I felt that too. And it's okay to feel this way, and you'll come out really strong in the end, as long as you just be open and willing to continue to learn and grow.
Wonderful, wonderful. Definitely make sure you build your network and talk it out. Talking about it is the #1 way to help overcome it. All right, we'll move on to our next question here. The next question is, describe a time when imposter syndrome got the best of you, and what did you do to bounce back? We'll start with Dr. Bay for this question.
Sure. So like I mentioned, I think imposter syndrome kind of has integrated into my career at multiple points. I guess an example would be for me is one of my roles, I switched from more of a traditional MSL role, which is usually more clinical focused, into my first field role, which was more economics focused. It was a lot of political rigmarole in order for me to even get this job, which I won't even go into. But of course, I came onto the team. I was the youngest person on the team. I was the only Black person on the team. And majority of the people on the team had completely different backgrounds than me. Everyone else came from managed care, either from a large payer, ESI, United Healthcare, something like that. I was coming from the fellowship route. So I had a completely different background than everyone else. When I came into this role, I think what was the hardest thing for me is that the customers that I was now meeting with were people who were managing budgets for large healthcare systems. And I was working on a very expensive drug at the time. For lack of better words, I was being attacked pretty much on a very regular basis about the cost of our drug. How are they supposed to pay for it? And I think I was just completely caught off guard. I didn't feel like I really knew how to combat in the conversations. I didn't come from a managed care background. I didn't even really understand all the ins and outs of the payer world for a community oncology setting. So I really was, struggling in this role. And I think for me, how I was able to overcome it is what I did have to recognize is I was in that role for a reason. And I think that what you see is in a lot of teams, diversity is key. And what my experience was completely different than anyone else had on my team. So what I tried to do was bring in a lot of experiences of what I had. I had more experience in pharma than anybody else on my team, regardless of the fact that I was the youngest person there. So I helped connect a lot of my colleagues with people in pharma, get us connected with HEOR teams, get us connected with other teams that could help build us. In return, I literally started interviewing people on my team and asking them, like, give me the details of how you used to process these claims. Give me the details of how you used to run these budgets, because I needed to gather the information from somewhere. So I think I say all that to say is really just recognize what your strengths are and be able to share those and exemplify those. And don't be scared to ask people for help. Like, you know, use your network and use your ability to work with other people to gather information from other people and just start to learn what you need to learn. Just recognize where your gaps are and just grow in that area.
Wonderful, wonderful. You definitely got to take a step back and figure out things that you can do to improve yourself so that you can overcome and you can grow better and achieve in your role. I'll also talk a little bit about this topic. One time when I felt defeated was my PGY1 residency during my oncology rotation. I really wanted to challenge myself to learn as much as I can, and during my PGY1 residency, because you have to be well-rounded and just learn as much as you can for the real world, because you never know where you're going to end up. But I had no clue about anything in oncology. The rotation was set up where you were with the physician. You initially round with the inpatient patients in the morning. You're at clinic all day with the oncologist during the day, helping with the outpatient patients. And then you go back and round on the inpatients again. So long days, 12-hour days. You're tired at the end of the day. You really don't have time to really review as much as you want. And I got my butt kicked and I felt defeated. And then after that, after we finished around with the preceptor, I also with the physician, I had a little talk or topic discussion with my preceptor. So I did great on the part where I had to work with the physician, but the part where I had to do disease state topics with the preceptor, pharmacy preceptor, I struggled. And then at the end of the rotation, she ended up giving me some constructive feedback saying that although it's something you're not strong in, something you don't like, or it's something you don't know very well, you really have to work on improving this area. So, you know, you feel bad because you don't know enough. You don't have the knowledge sometimes for every single area to know about every single thing. But this feedback, I didn't take it as something where she was trying to put me down or say that, I'm not good enough. I basically took it as constructive feedback. Like, this is something that I need to work on by the time I finish residency. So that way, when I'm out being a real, pharmacist, I have a real pharmacist job, I can use the skills that I learned from this and basically be able to tackle any other situation. So, I use that that feedback to basically motivate myself and push myself to not kind of fall into a bubble of being, sad and depressed because I did poorly, but to use it as, hey, this is somewhere you can work, you can grow. Like, you're not great here, but you want to be good. So you really need to work on this and improve yourself. Take it a day at a time. You'll get better. So that's my advice to you, is to use it as constructive feedback to improve yourself, and that'll help you overcome it. Because eventually you will learn a little bit more, or you'll know how to handle a situation where you don't know anything. All right. So 2 questions down. Does anyone in the chat have anything they would like to add or come on to the camera and talk to us about, or any questions they would like us to kind of go over right now? You have to be quiet. All right, looks like nothing yet. So don't forget to put in those questions if you have any along the way. We're here for your help. Okay. All right, so for those of you who are just coming in, we're going over different experiences that we've had on how to overcome imposter syndrome and kind of what we do to shake out of a funk. Next question I have for you guys is, how did you build your confidence as you progress through residency, fellowship, or your first career? We'll have Dr. Chiles again start with this question.
I appreciate it. How did I build the confidence? So it's very hard to build confidence when you're first starting out, because you have all this knowledge, and then to transition from a student, one to then a resident, and then to like a practicing, clinician. It's very, very hard. But there's little tricks that I use for myself that has helped me get better at being confident in whatever I'm recommending for my patients. And so it actually started in pharmacy school and kind of in residency, where I would kind of talk over things with my friends, and like when we're studying, or if we have a fake patient and we're going over in like small groups, I started telling myself that if I am wrong, I'm going to be wrong confidently. And not necessarily I'm just going to throw out random things or say random things, but in my mind, I try to make a roadmap to kind of see how do I conclude to the answer that I'm about to get. And so if whatever the situation is, I give my answer and then say it's wrong, like in a practice setting, and say it's wrong, and then say the preceptor or the professor tells me that it's wrong, and they explain their reasoning, then I go back and I'm like, okay, how did I get to that conclusion into why it's wrong? And maybe I need to change the pathway to change my thinking, and the fact that I could still get it, or get the answer that I actually need. So it's just all about being confident and being okay being wrong. And I had to be okay with myself saying like, okay, I got it wrong. And next time when this patient comes or this case comes up, that I won't be wrong. And so it's just learning, just having a lot of self-awareness of your thought process. And so usually when you have that, when you have different patients and different things that come about, you could take on those experiences like, oh, I remember I got that wrong. I'm gonna change my thought process, and get to the conclusion where I can help this patient. And so it's just all about being confident in your wrong answer, and just make sure you don't like harm a patient, but usually in a practice setting, in a safe space where you could be wrong.
Nice. I love that. All right, Dr. Bay, would you also like to answer that question for us?
Yeah, I guess, sure. I think one thing I would add is, now being years out, I advise everyone to really take advantage of that residency and fellowship time period. Those are years and experience that you will never get back. And I think one of the best parts of that experience is like, you're expected to learn and grow during that time period. That's the time that you're supposed to develop this confidence. You have the opportunity to literally ask any and everybody feedback, and it's their job to literally provide that feedback for you. That becomes something that, like, I think later in your career, you start to find out that feedback is actually a gift. People don't want to give it to you, your colleagues with individuals, even your manager you could be managing your manager later. And it becomes a lot more difficult to develop the relationships in order for people to give you very candid feedback later in your career. So when you are in that beginning stages of your career, I advise people that the best way to get your confidence, and I think what happened for me is I asked people questions about my delivery all the time, everything that I was doing. And, a lot of people, I think, just coming from a different cultural basis, a lot of people want to pat you on the shoulder and make you feel good. Like, the amount of times in my career that I had to pull people to the side and be like, yo, please stop sugarcoating this. Like, I need the real, like, how am I going to grow if you're just making everything just seem like it's peachy? So you really have to ask people for that. And I think when you start to identify the things that are not your strongest suits, you know what to focus on. And so, I mean, not that obviously you should be harking on the negative all the time, but this is just my approach. I tend to focus on the things that I can improve on the most. And I know that when I'm focusing on that, it makes me feel more confident. When I know the things that people have told me that are gaps for myself, and I'm currently working on that on a regular basis, that gives me more confidence, especially when I know that that's a gap and I can see myself improve in that. So I think just focusing on your own self-improvement would build your own confidence, and where you came from and where you've grown to. That should build your own internal confidence, and you can walk into the room confidently, knowing what you bring to the table now and how that you can continuously evolve and grow.
Wonderful. I love that, because a lot of people don't know where we came from and what we had to get through to get to where we are today. So if they knew, if they only knew. Thank you for those wonderful words, Dr. Bay. Looks like we have a question from the audience here from Dr. Hunter out there. He says, as African Americans, and for two of you also being women, how much pressure do you feel to be twice as good as your non-minority counterparts? Okay. So we'll let Dr. Crease take a little moment and try to answer this question for us first.
Thank you, Dr. Hill. So I saw that come through in the chat, and it's an interesting question. And so like Dr. Bay mentioned, specifically for me, I am the only Black person both on my team and my department. So it's something that I'm cognizant of. But for me mentally, I try not to harp on this, because I know if I'm thinking like, oh, wow, this is just me out here in the crowd, like that will, for me, negatively affect me. So what I do, I just do what I do best. I remain confident. And so like you all mentioned, feedback is something that I thrive on as well. I love feedback and I love process improvement. So anytime I can hear something that I can change, I can fix, or as a team, we can change and fix, that's where my gears start to turn. So for this pressure, and I'm like currently also watching the Olympics. So I don't know if all of you are keeping up with this, how there's just so much pressure on a lot of us as minorities to be the best consistently. And I personally believe you have to take care of yourself first. And that's what I do. I'm very like mindful of this. I have to be well for myself so I can show up to work giving my best for the patients, for my team, and being able to really make a positive impact. So for myself, I don't try to dwell on it or harp on it. But for me, I know that what I deliver is great work. And so maybe as I'm looking at my colleagues who maybe look different than me and their work is not as great, I continue to shine through in that way. And it's something that the work will speak for itself. And that's how I continue to grow in that regard. And I really just, I'm always wanting to improve and grow myself. So there's not ever a place where someone could say, Dr. Crease, I don't know about this. It's like, if you're giving me a piece of feedback, I'm going to take it, I'm going to run with it, and it's going to be even better than what you had envisioned. So that's how I try to deal with that pressure.
Thank you, Dr. Crease. It's wonderful. I also want to answer this question, being a African-American male who went to Nebraska where there are no Black people, and then I'm in California where it's all Asians. I'm the only Black guy a lot of time. I think I'm the first Black pharmacist at VA Long Beach in years, because Black people see me, they're like, oh my gosh, like you're a Black pharmacist? So I understand having to deal with the pressure for representing my whole minority race. And I don't think too much about it. I mean, you feel the pressure in the back of your mind saying, you know, I'm the only Black person here. I do want to perform well, so they won't think all Black people are poor, or all Black people do things wrong in a certain way. So I do definitely try to stand out in that, and you know, and do at least a satisfactory job. But my thought about it is, whatever I'm going to do it well, and I'm going to do it to the best of my ability. And anything I put out there, it's mine. I take ownership of that. And I don't want to put anything out there that's poor or terrible. So I don't really have too much of a problem with this. I just kind of let my light shine, and I shine bright. All righty. We're gonna keep it rolling here. It looks like we got another question here from the chat. Let's see. I think it's here from Dr. Victor. We'll go with this one. So, what recommendations do you all have for pharmacists practicing in retail settings, or pharmacists who didn't necessarily have any residency? So this question here will have, and well, I think everyone here either did fellowship or residency. But I think we'll have like someone kind of talk to us about what they may think, how it might affect retail pharmacists. We can start with, does any of you guys have retail pharmacists?
Yeah, I had some experience as an intern while I was in school at Walmart. And so I could definitely talk on that. It's hard in a retail setting to prove yourself to your patients, because a lot of the time in a retail setting, a lot of individuals think it's like a fast food kind of thing. They don't really respect your credentials. They think that, oh, I need my pills now, I'm waiting, all this other stuff. And so there are times where a patient will come in and ask you a question, and you're dealing with a PA from a week ago, and another doctor's calling you, and it's very hard to balance those things. I think in that type of setting, you have to, one, start prioritizing yourself and the tasks that are at hand. And at the same time, you also still have to be okay with not knowing. Being able to convey that to a patient. It's like, I'm not actually sure. Let me go check with my colleague, or let me look that up real quick. Because I'd rather double check than give you a wrong information. So I think for me, when I was being a student, that's what I had to do a lot. And a lot of patients actually kind of like that, in the sense of, okay, they're making sure that I'm safe, or my medication's safe, and things like that. So try not to get boggled down with the task in the pharmacy, but your first priority is always your patient. And so keep that in the back of your mind, or the forefront of your mind, and just be okay, again, of not knowing. And so that's what I had to do when I was a student.
Thank you, Dr. Chiles. Definitely patient safety first. It looks like we also have some comments from Dr. Lyman and Dr. Shands in the chat about their opinions as well. All right, we'll move on to our next question here. How can we help each other as minorities to overcome imposter syndrome? So thinking about women, thinking about minorities as African Americans, or other minorities as a fact. Let's start with Dr. Bay. I feel like she will give us a good answer on this one.
Sure. Yeah. So I think this is really just all around paying it forward. I guess for me, when I was at BMS, which I was at BMS for about 8 years, one of my mentors who was there when I first started, she started a little group, which we used to call the Circle of Trust. And basically every year, whenever new residents, fellows came in, you would be kind of initiated into the Circle of Trust. And we used this as an opportunity just to talk about issues that we knew that would kind of face us, and share our experiences with the new incoming fellows or residents every year, and just trying to create a safe space for any questions and comments that they might have had about what they were feeling or what they were going through. I think some of us who have been already working, we might anticipate the imposter syndrome before a lot of the residents and things start even understanding what it might be, or start even already encountering some of these issues. So they're a little bit more equipped for the situation, or already know what to expect before it even happens. So now this is something that I ask of anybody that I mentor to do, is like, if you see anyone come in, reach out to them. Now at the company I'm at now, we just brought on 2 fellows. I reached out to both of them proactively, and I was like, we need to just start the candid relationship. And anybody who knows me knows that I keep things super real. And I think by using my experiences and what I've struggled with, to just be very honest about that and share that with other individuals, it helps to give other people confidence as well. And that's what I've had mentors for me do in the past. So I just say that, we talk about the pressure of being, Black women or in this industry and things like that. I think I feel a pressure to make sure that I'm paying it forward, so whoever's coming after me has an easier experience than that I did.
Yes, wonderful answer. Pave it forward. Help others around you. Would anyone out in the chat like to comment on this topic? I think it's a really good topic, and since we have so many minorities and within the chat, would anyone else like to express their opinions or discuss anything with us? Oh, nobody? Okay. All right, we'll move on to our next question. If you notice people are struggling with imposter syndrome, what can you do to support them? We'll let Dr. Crease answer this question for us.
Yeah, thank you. So for this, I'm always super positive. So if I see people who are, down on themselves or they're maybe going through some challenges, I always love to talk to them. But something that I really encourage you all to start doing if you don't, or if you're starting a new career or position, is to really take stock of what you're doing, whether it's like you're writing it down in a journal or you're keeping an electronic log, like every single project, every single positive intervention that you have, every single team dynamic that you have changed in a positive light, like write that down. So let's say 6 months from now, maybe you're feeling as though, I don't know if I've accomplished much. I don't know what I'm really doing here in this space. You can see that all on paper. I think there's beauty to like writing it out, and really there's power in the tongue. So you've written it out about what you've accomplished. And so you could say, okay, here are my goals. Maybe this is what happened in the past 6 months. I accomplished these things. And so seeing what I did do in these 6 months, what can I achieve in the next 6 months? How can I take this even further? So that's really where I like to start with people who might be struggling a bit, maybe feeling that imposter syndrome or feeling like, oh, I don't know if I've even done much here, but you certainly have. And I think as clinicians and as pharmacists, we're trained to just go, go, go. It's like, I have a goal, I'm going to hit it. I hit that goal, what's the next one? I don't think a lot of us take the time to really sit in the fact that you've accomplished so much during this time. There's always, I'm looking out for the next goal, I'm going to get there. But once you're running, and you don't take time to stop and really take a breath and live in the moment to really explain to yourself, wow, I've accomplished so much, I think that's when you start to feel down on yourself. So really being able to keep that log, whether it's in your phone, whether you like to write it out. I'm a list person, so I love to do pros and cons, and I'm a super planner. So the pandemic has really brought me back down to reality a little bit, because not everything always works out, and that's okay. But as long as you know, like, what is your why? What are your goals? If you have a purpose, you're helping patients, you're impacting them on a day-to-day basis, I think that can help you get out of any type of funk that you may be in.
Love it. Love the response, Dr. Crease. All right, I also want to put in my 2 cents on this. To help people get out of the funk, I can't really control what they do, but I can control what I do. And I'm a hype man. I'm going to hype you up. If you're just walking down the street smiling, I'm like, oh, look at you. You walking down the street smiling. You're doing wonderful today. I'm going to hype you up. You do, you complete an order, your first order, and you did everything right the first time. Or, you had a tough counseling with your patient, you had a tough counseling with your patient, and you were able to, get their A1C down from 11 to 9. Like, I'm gonna hype you up for the little goals and the big goals. So for you to kind of help others, you basically can just be positive and hype them up. All right, looks like we got another question here in the chat from Dr. Bryant. It says, he wasn't sure if we discussed this already, but we haven't. So he wanted to know, how do you identify whether it's imposter syndrome occurring at your workplace, or if you're actually being discriminated against, or if you're in a hostile environment, toxic workplace. Let's see, Dr. Bay, would you like to answer this one?
Yeah, so I think this is probably a question that will come up with every situation or something like that. I think it's why it's so important that we're focusing on this topic in general, because you could be taking things that have nothing to do with you and be blaming yourself if you are suffering from imposter syndrome. I think that's why this topic is so important, and people to have that confidence in themselves so they can be able to have a clear eyes view when situations are arising. I'm just trying to think of my career and things like this. And I've definitely had situations, particularly even in that role I was talking about, where, I've tried to work with individuals who just didn't want to work with me, like they just didn't think, I don't think that I was the person that they wanted to bring with them to meetings and things like that, So in that role that I was in, I worked with a lot of more commercial account managers who tend to be more white males, and they want to bring, a white male with them. This is the guy that's coming. He's going to speak to the data, things like that. And I could sense that because, you can sense how people pick individuals or who they want to bring with them to certain accounts and stuff like that. I won't get into, what that is, but I think we all know that that's just how the system that we work in. So for me, I had to be confident in myself, knowing that I could do just as good of a job, if not better, than my counterparts. And that's just what I brought to the table anytime I had an opportunity. And, you know, I think for me, I just felt like I started to see individuals who were probably not as used to working with someone like me before, starting to see some of my strengths. And then all of a sudden you start to see people are wanting to work with you. People are wanting to see things with you. And I think, you know, one of the things about imposter syndrome, I personally, that it bothers me a little bit, is because I see us as minorities as having so much advantage for ourselves. And I think that's what we have to focus on. We overcome so many things in order to be in the careers that we are at. And we have these personalities and this vibrancy about us that really helps us in our careers. And if you can be just as strong as you are academically, clinically, you know, whatever it is that you're doing, but bring that vibrancy, bring what makes you to the table. I think that we actually are in a great position to excel in our career. So I think that you have to have that confidence to be able to differentiate if it's discrimination, because you could be blaming yourself for something that actually has nothing to do with you.
Yes, great advice.
Can I say something to that?
Yeah, I was gonna ask if anyone else wanted to.
So I actually had a kind of situation during my first year of residency. And the advice that I would like to give everybody in this chat is to document everything. Document everything, copy everything, copy your feedback, have a second email that has no HIPAA on it to kind of copy and forward correspondence between your preceptors, your director, just because that when you're going through it, that it's your fault and that you're down on yourself, that you may not know anything like that. But when it keeps happening, and then you start to, ask your colleagues like, hey, are you going through this? Like, did you mess up with this? Oh yeah, I messed up. Then how's the reaction? Oh, it was fine. Okay. And then that who doesn't look like you will have, oh yeah, it was fine. I got it wrong. It's fine. I was like, okay. So, and then you start talking to your mentors. It's like, hey, have you experienced this? And he's like, oh, yep, that's discrimination. I was like, oh, okay, bet. And so just document everything, copy everything, because when you're going through it, you're going to think that it's yourself, but it's really not. There are people, when you get into the real world, there are people, because you look different, will actively try to ruin your career. And I'll just say that. So yeah.
Thank you. Would anyone else have any words on this? Dr. Crease, anyone in the audience? Okay. Yeah, also second that, like, get out of that toxic workplace. Maybe the workplace is just toxic and you just need to change the scenery. So definitely think about that. Looks like we have another question from the chat. Oh, you guys make sure you read the chat. There's a lot of gems being dropped in there by other people, so keep up with the chat. So Dr. Tori, I don't know if she's doctor, but Tori is here, or Tori, he or she, I'm not sure which one. But his question or her question is, how would you go about reaching out to someone to let them know that you're potentially dealing with imposter syndrome to get that help and that feedback? Dr. Crease, would you like to help us with this question?
Sure. And hey, Tori, I know that's my classmate. She's at Xavier. But thank you for the question. So your question is mainly, if you're feeling this way, you really want to get validation in how you feel to really see how you can move forward. Definitely this goes back to like having a mentor and talking this through, because people may have different perspectives than what you bring. So you have your own personal perspective of how you believe something is going, but when you're bouncing those ideas off of others, they can really put things into a larger focus for you. So you're not just focused on that one nuanced thing. So for me, I love to ask questions. That is my number one thing. I know we talked about how to fill in those gaps in knowledge. And if you feel like you're maybe inadequate in a certain way, I always want to know the why. I always want to know, okay, exactly how does this work? And if I were to do it all over again, flip it over on the side, how can I explain this to someone who knows nothing about the field? So I ask so many questions. And I believe that when you start to ask questions and you start to talk to people who have walked in your same path and shoes, you'll try to understand and get that focus. So they may say like, okay, I've experienced this too with this imposter syndrome, but this is how you can overcome it. So I feel like you can't go through this alone. We've talked a lot about networking and really leaning in. And I love to mentor as well. And I know we've talked a lot about, I love the circle of trust that Dr. Bay spoke about, but definitely lifting as you climb. So in this role that we're in, we have to make it a point to really, like you mentioned, look back and say, okay, is there someone who looks like me who I think needs help? Like, we hope that that would be proactive rather than reactive. So definitely when you start your career, seek out those people and hopefully they'll reach out to you before you even know who they are. So I hope that helps you a little bit, Tori.
Thank you so much for helping Tori out with that question. All right, let's keep it rolling here. We got a lot of good questions, a lot of good feedback. Anyone coming in, we're having great discussion here. Feel free to jump into the chat and ask any questions. All right, I see we have another audience question, but I'm going to do one of our planned ones real quick. So the next planned question is, how do you address the gap in knowledge or skill making you feel inadequate? Let's start with Dr. Chiles on this one.
That's a really good question. To address the gap, and as a pharmacist, you're always learning. You're supposed to be learning any chance you get. And what I do personally is I try to set aside time every Sunday where, I try to read like new article or try to learn something new to really just get my brain to continue to learn. Because once you get out of school and then you're not studying anymore all the time, you start to lose a lot of information. And you'll realize that, oh, wow, I forgot that. I know I learned that, but I forgot that. And so to proactively trying to keep your brain turning, I try to test myself. I try to push myself in a way that I have to, because you're in a position of power once you get into the medical field and when you get into your career. And so you owe it to yourself, you owe it to your patients to really try to go above and beyond in what you try to, you go above and beyond in whatever field of pharmacy that you go to. So for me, I try to read and learn something, not necessarily in my field when I'm good at, but something that, like, I'm terrible at oncology. So I try to learn something about oncology. I'm terrible at everything inpatient. And so chronic diseases, I got you. But so I still try to keep up with the ever-changing field of pharmacy. So, yeah.
Thank you very much, Dr. Chiles. Would anyone with the fellows like to jump in, or people who've done a fellowship jump in and help us with this question as well?
Yeah, I think kind of along the same lines as just being a continuous learner. I think I've talked a lot about feedback and trying to derive out what are some of the areas that you can improve on, and focusing on those areas and where you're trying to gather additional knowledge. So I feel like in every role that I've been in, there's been an area that wasn't my strongest suit. Because I think when you at least within pharma, when you're moving into different roles, you're probably maybe strong in one particular area, and then you're like, okay, I can learn in this area. But you can't just say that. Like, you have to actually start to learn in that area. So even where I'm at now, I'm kind of working in health economics. I didn't do a health economics fellowship. Most of the people who work in health economics have been working in health economics since their whole career. So for me, I'm sneakily in the back, like doing mad e-modules and stuff on, ISPOR and things like that, to make sure that I'm speaking at the same level as any other individual who's been working in HEOR the entire time. So I think it does come down to the same thing. You can identify the gaps probably yourself, knowing where you could be stronger at, but also in taking feedback from others on areas that you can improve on, and actually being active and doing that. I think throughout my career, something for me is, I think comparison can be of the devil, but sometimes comparison can be slightly helpful sometimes, just because it helps me see what other people might have strengths in that I might not have a strength in. And that's what I'm going to focus on, because I feel like I want to have an equal playing field with anyone who is a colleague of mine. And that's what I'm kind of going to focus to learn on. So just, yeah, the learning aspect is real. And I think for at least the pharmacy students, I know when I was in pharmacy school, I really thought that once I finished, I was going to be done studying. And I hate to tell some of y'all that I probably study more now than I did in pharmacy school.
Yeah, so I'm studying as well. Yeah, going off of that, for our fourth year students, Antonia had a question for us. Since she is currently a fourth year student, is there a different way that she should deal with imposter syndrome, even though her career hasn't started yet? And I'll start answering this one first. So Antonia, you can have imposter syndrome anytime, especially being a STEM student. You're gonna have to deal with competing in such a competitive field, and you can experience imposter syndrome there. So one way is by not acknowledging your accomplishments. So some people have imposter syndrome. They're like, oh, I got lucky and was picked for the scholarship, or oh, I got an A on this, but it was luck. No, you studied really hard and you worked your butt off to achieve these awards and get these goals. Another thing I like to say is, it's as a fourth year student, you may be feeling uncomfortable about rotations and not performing well. But as a student, this is your time to make mistakes. And that's how you grow. You make mistakes. You fail over and over and over until you get it right. And the more times you fail, the more stuff you need to study and learn. So you fail, you learn it, and then the next time you get it the next time. So the more things you get wrong, the more you actually get to learn over that time. So use that time to fail. And since you have priests who are behind you, who are going to double check everything you do, you're not signing your own orders yet. Use that time to grow, fail, and improve. Would anyone else like to add to that question?
No, I would just add, I think as a pharmacy student, this is a great position to be in, of even understanding that this is a potential concern as you start your career, and just even joining forums like this to hear people talking about their experiences. I don't think that being who I was, I didn't think that I would suffer from something like this when I came into my career, just because I felt pretty confident in pharmacy school. And then I was thrown off my axis when I moved to New Jersey and was dropped into a corporate setting and had a huge culture shock that hit me. I didn't really know what to expect, and I wasn't expecting the struggles that I was going to have to overcome. So it's just a great position to be in. And I think the more that we speak about this, especially to pharmacy students who are preparing themselves for their career, you're in such a great position to be able to begin your career and get the best experience out of your fellowship or your residency.
Yes. One last thing I would like to add on this is, don't compare yourself to others. If I compare myself to Dr. Snyder coming through Xavier, and I would be a sad, crying, depressed man feeling like a. But don't compare. You're on your own race. You are your own person. You grow at different speeds. You're gonna reach your finish line during your time. So don't compare yourself to others. All right, it's going good. We're over an hour. We're about an hour in, and we got a lot of good audience questions, a lot of good audience participation. I'm loving that. We'll move on to our next question here, which is, the outside world says that we are inferior, we don't belong. How do you block out the noise and continue to thrive? Let's start with Dr. Chiles on this.
That's a great question. One of the things that I do, for those that know me, I'm a very positive person. Like Dr. Hill, I hype people up. I use my personality to quote unquote win people over, because a lot of people in our field, we're stepping in a field where there's not a lot of minorities, there's not a lot of us. And so one of the things that I've learned over the years, that just as minorities or just as African Americans, is that we have really good people skills. and we're able to relate to a lot of situations because we had to put ourselves in uncomfortable situations. And what I had to do, especially going through my PGY2, where just like Dr. Hill is just, there's nobody that looks like us here in this county. And when I saw him during interviews, like we never met, we never talked. I went up there, I was like, hey man, how you doing? And it's just like, and then a lot of my co-residents like, y'all know each other? I was like, nope. I see a Black person, I say what up. And so that's what it is. You have to create your own little world and your own little bubble and prove individuals wrong. And just be yourself and don't try to conform to whatever the atmosphere is. Just be unapologetically yourself. And so that's what I am. I've told people to like, oh, you need to cut your hair, X, Y, and Z. No, I'm not gonna cut my hair. Like, no. So just be yourself. And I think you will learn that people will respect you more for that, and holding on to your values as well. So.
Thank you for that wonderful response. Would anyone else on the panel like to add to this?
Sure. I think, yeah, so even hearing that term in itself, it just angers me. Because I think I've already mentioned this before, that I think that we are in such great positions to have such great careers because we bring so much to the table. And I think to your point is that we have this vibrancy and we have this ability to really bond relationships with almost anybody because we don't have a choice. This is what we've been doing our entire lives. I think our people skills are unmatched in this field, to be honest with you. For me, I take that and the pressure, I use it as motivation. For me, it's part of what motivates me to prove people wrong. Like even in some of those scenarios I've talked about where people that I knew that they didn't expect much out of me when they saw me. I've had situations where, I've come to do presentations at state legislatures and things like that. And people get confused when they find out that it's me who's doing the presentation. And that powers me because I'm like, I'm waiting to see what your response is going to be after this presentation. Like it powers me up, So I use it as motivation for myself. And I think also it's propelled me in my career as maybe someone who could become comfortable, who I've realized that I don't have the comfort to become comfortable. I have to be in a position to help create opportunities for other people. And like I said, I want those who come in after me to not have to deal with as much as what I've dealt with. So I say use it as motivation because at the end of the day, we know that it's not true. Anytime I hear the word inferior, I get infuriated. So I use it as something that propels me. And I encourage everyone else to try to think of it from that perspective. I've heard a number of my colleagues, it's funny, even within, during the pandemic, we've had the situation with George Floyd and then, the insurrection at the Capitol. If you know how many people I know said the next day is when they started applying for new jobs. The next day is when they started looking into leadership roles and things like that. It actually is what propelled me to say, okay, I'm going to start looking at director roles now. I need to start putting myself in a position to break this system. So use it, to power you up. That's just my advice.
Thank you so much for the wonderful advice. I'm sure everyone can take a little piece of that and use it. Okay, so we have finished our pre-planned questions. Now at this point, I want to see if anyone from the audience would like to, talk about a time where they experienced imposter syndrome, and we can discuss that, or if they have any comments they would like to add to any of our questions that we talked about today. Hoping to get one or two people. No, y'all ready to go home? Y'all tired? Come on, Dr. Hunter, you're not too old.
No, I would just say this is just me commenting. I think that looking at you guys and just being proud is being one of those individuals that went through some of the things y'all are describing early in my career. I've been a pharmacist for 15 years now. So going through my postgraduate training and dealing with some of the things that that are being described, it makes me I'm happy to see that y'all are addressing it from a global perspective and trying to, you know, put the knowledge that you've gained from going through those experiences and give it to others, because it was really no blueprint. It was kind of just ride it out, or, you know, be the thug that you are, you know, to try to get through the situation when I was going through it. So I'm sitting here looking at this and thinking like, man, this could have been done 15 years ago and it would have still been useful, just because you do have people that are actually, I think, strategically trying to make you feel like you don't belong. Not even necessarily that you yourself don't have confidence in yourself, but they're actually creating this microcosm of making you feel like you don't belong in the position that you're in or have the opportunity that you have. So it's great to see y'all, you know, hear y'all talking about it and giving advice and sharing your experiences and trying to build up the ones that are coming behind you guys to not have to necessarily deal with the same things, and, you know, you going through the things so somebody else doesn't have to go through that.
Thank you, Dr. Hunter, for those kind words and that advice and that great comment on what we're talking about today. Okay, looks like we have one more comment from Benjamin Pham. He said, we have talked about imposter syndrome from within. What about if you see it in your colleagues? What's something you can speak about today? So I think, Benjamin, we spoke a little bit on how we can help someone if we see someone who's experiencing imposter syndrome, how we can help them. But we can say another one or two things about it if anyone would like to jump in.
Yeah, I can add to this. So I know we talked about being the hype person, being the hype man. So that's a role I like to play, but sometimes people need a little bit of reminder. So if this is your close colleague and they're kind of struggling, you could say, do you remember when you gave that presentation and so many people thought you were phenomenal? Do you remember how good you are at creating strategic plans and how people want you on their team? So if someone is struggling that you can sense, if this is someone that you work with on a day-to-day basis, don't be afraid to remind them of who they are and empower them, because sometimes people forget. For whatever reason, there's life that happens and people need that little extra boost, a little extra reminder. So if it's someone that you know and you can definitely speak to their skills and accomplishments, tell them, like, this is what I know about you. This is who you are as a person. And I hope that you would agree with me too. Like, let me remind you about who you are.
Thank you so much for answering that comment for Benjamin. All right. So we're heading towards the end of our webinar here today. Would anyone have any final comments before we close? Okay, looks like nothing at the moment. So thank you all for coming out today to join us for the event. I hope we were able to provide you with the weapons you need to take on imposter syndrome. And I would like to thank you all the panelists for helping me look good and becoming a super team and giving everyone great advice and words of wisdom. And last, I'd like to thank Dr. Schecksnyder for giving me this opportunity to lead and host this panel. For now, I also want to remind you again to follow us on social media, net.com and Pharmacy Initiative Leaders on Facebook and LinkedIn. And I'll hand it over to Dr. Chandler Checks for final words.
Thank you, Dr. Hill, Dr. Chiles, Dr. Crease, Dr. Bay. You all were absolutely amazing. And I really appreciate everyone in the comments as well, just giving us your ideas, your advice, but also your questions, because we really wanted to make this a discussion. And we really wanted to help you out. So I think that's what we did tonight. And this will definitely be recorded and placed on our YouTube. So make sure you follow us, like Xavier said, at Peers Connect on our YouTube, Instagram, and as well as Twitter, and Pharmacy Initiative Leaders on LinkedIn and Facebook.